White House has applauded Australia for standing up to China, criticising Beijing for attempting to intimidate our government. The praise came at the annual AUSMIN meetings in Washington, where our defence and foreign ministers announced plans to further tighten our relationship with the United States.
Smiles for the camera, but behind-the-scenes relief. Australia attended the annual AUSMIN meetings in person, arriving in a country devastated by a pandemic.
Not many partners would do that for us, and so thank you to each of you and your teams for being with us here in person. It was very important that we all be together.
As Chinese concerns abroad dominated discussions.
We started this morning by talking at length about the Chinese Communist Party's malign activity in the Indo-Pacific region and indeed all around the world.
And we spoke in detail about the Chinese Communist Party's destabilizing activities and the fact that Beijing is increasingly resorting to coercion and intimidation to advance its strategic objectives at the expense of other nations.
Our most important strategic ally lauding the Morrison government for its efforts in pushing for a global inquiry into the outbreak of COVID-19, an outbreak the US president repeatedly calls the China virus.
The United States commends the Morrison government for standing up for democratic values and the rule of law, despite intense, continued, coercive pressure from the Chinese Communist Party to bow to Beijing's wishes.
COVID-19 has without doubt exacerbated the security challenges in our region. Some countries are using the pandemic to undermine liberal democracy.
With China our largest trading partner, the Foreign Minister walks a fine line.
The relationship that we have with China is important, and we have no intention of injuring it.
The Defence Minister remaining tight-lipped over whether Australia will join with America and sail within the 12 nautical mile limit of illegal islands in the South China Sea, a move that would enrage Beijing and likely force a response.
We've agreed an ambitious set of defence outcomes.
What they are, though, is still largely unknown. In a further slight, both nations have also thrown their weight behind a democratic Taiwan. Along with intelligence and military assets, the Australian and US governments will establish a working group to counter disinformation, shining a light, they say, on the truth. The shared message:
we will step up and ensure that we support our mates further afield.
We will fly, we will sell, and we will operate wherever international law allows, and defend the rights of our allies and partners to do the same.
At a time of great uncertainty. Jonathan Lee, Sky News, Canberra.
And joining us with more analysis now is Mr Townshend. He's the Director of Foreign Policy and Defence at the United States Study Centre. Ashley, appreciate your time. What does the Foreign Minister mean there when she talks about stepping up to help the US when it comes to China?
Thanks, Ash. I think the Foreign Minister is referring to the way that Australia will continue to and will expand its direct support of Southeast Asian countries in particular who are at the front line of Chinese maritime coercion in the South China Sea. Over the last few months, we've seen an uptick in the way China has sought to harass regional fishing fleets, regional commercial vessels that are undertaking hydrocarbon exploration and development. And Australia and the United States, along with other countries, have at different times undertaken presence activities in the vicinity of that form of harassment in order to send a message to China that they're not to be picking off smaller countries one by one, but in fact the region will demonstrate a degree of collective action in standing up against that kind of coercion. We did it most recently in April, and I think that rather than pursuing FONOPS at this point in time, which is a patrol within 12 miles of a disputed Chinese artificial island, instead Australia will be broadening out that agenda because that does provide tangible security benefits to regional countries.
Ashley, how significant was it that we didn't hear much, if anything, about the Middle East, about Afghanistan, about those issues that have been so much dominating these talks for so many years now, and instead we're hearing a lot more about our own region, the Indo-Pacific region?
Look, that's exactly right, Ash. I think that the last 10 AUSMINs have focused on, or at least had sections of the joint statement and sections of the dialogue focused on ongoing military operations in the Middle East, whether that be Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, the counter-ISIS fight. This particular AUSMIN zeroed in only on the counter-terrorism aspect of that and actually didn't even in name refer to any of those countries by their proper nouns. That's a significant change. It's taken a long time for the US-Australia alliance to rebalance itself from focusing on, frankly, global security issues in the Middle East that are of limited strategic importance to Australia. I would argue also increasingly of limited strategic importance to the United States, and instead focus on building out the health, the security, the prosperity, the shared deterrence objectives in our region that we have and that we've now seen in AUSMIN focus on exclusively. In 2018, AUSMIN was supposed to be about the Indo-Pacific, and indeed a lot of positive initiatives came out of that dialogue. But then last year, the Trump administration spent a large part of AUSMIN trying to convince Australia to come back into the Persian Gulf for its own counter-Iran efforts. So it's really good to see that this year the principles have held the line and have focused on this part of the world.
Ashley Townshend, appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ash.